I can't hear John. Do other people hear him?
Okay, so this time it wasn't me.
Yeah, I can hear you, Brandon. Okay.
Okay. I just assume it's my audio issues all the time.
I saw your comment. I was like, oh no, not again. And I saw John talking. I'm like, wait, is it me too?
Can you hear us though? Okay, you can hear us. You just can't speak. One of the things that I've tried is to change the mic to another mic and then change it back. Sometimes that works for me.
That's been very successful for me in the past too. Even just pulling up the audio settings in Zoom.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
We can
Yes.
hear you now.
All right, let me try switching back to my better microphone just in case.
And no, we can't hear that.
All right, well, anyways, well, the when I tried to install the new Zoom client, it stopped like halfway through and said your Zoom application is managed by your company, and I'm like, well, shouldn't you stop before you start installing? But anyway, maybe it's not that. We'll see. We'll see. Maybe it's just a separate thing. I got a message from Justin about the CNCF, the tag meeting, the EMEA tag meeting that he showed up, but there were notes, but there was nobody on the call.
Yeah, we caught him on the not the verifiable SBOM, the SBOM meeting, and realized that he just showed up an hour late. He didn't have the right time zone in his calendar invite.
Time zones, right?
Daylight savings foils us all. We just need to switch to UTC and solve it all once and for all.
Well, we switched a couple of them to UTC and it still caused a ton of issues.
Well, switching it to UTC, like for this one, doesn't work because this one we base it off of American time zones in terms of daylight savings. So we say it's UTC, but yeah, UTC 4 p.m. is not right. It's currently 3 p.m.
Yeah, you
Stop
also
listening to it for tough meetings, because I feel like it's having it be wrong is worse than not having it, in my opinion.
All right. Did anybody have anything else they want to chat about for this? Going once, going twice.
I have something.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, oops, I just put my foot in. Yeah, I just put my foot in and I was like, I better say something. So I saw a presentation about N bombs, network bombs, but in that presentation, there was some mention about how policies are driven by patterns. And I thought that was an interesting take on policies. So I'm wondering what y'all think about that, like having our approach that way. And yes, I'm also laughing, Michael, because it's another bomb.
I'm curious what they meant by that, because like in most cases, I mean, I think it's a feedback loop, right? Usually you have something like policy, like a baseline policy, something that seems reasonable, and over time, you sort of update it based on changes to sort of the what's coming kind of from below, whether it's patterns or something else. So I'm curious what they kind of meant by that.
What they meant by patterns? I think what they meant by patterns was just the way that the business operates. And what they want to. So I think when they say patterns, they just say like, okay, the business operates in this way. And then policies is like, we actually want to direct the business to operate in this other way or with constraints. We wanted to keep operating the same way, but with some guardrails. But I think there is like an understanding, or like there's an assumption that the business knows how to operate in a certain way. So if a business is migrating to cloud native, for example, they may be looking for direction on how to change their operations. So it's almost like they want to be able to look at what the landscape is at a certain point in time, and then write policies based on that. For example, like in cloud native, we use a lot of open source software. So they'll say, okay, looks like this is the pattern. We use a lot of open source software in all these different languages. We'll write a policy based on that. Or at least that's my understanding just from watching the presentation. I will say that the presentation, like the folks who are creating NBOM, are creating from the assumption that data and information gets transferred between one business and another, and not in a distributed fashion the way cloud native works. So just caveat there. Brandon, and then Brandon. Oh,
Alright,
Brandon L, and then Brandon N.
I'll go first. So I would say I hesitate a little bit when kind of like they use the word network bomb, right? Because I think that when it comes to cloud native, we are depends how they define it, but I think that is a bit of an anti-pattern. So at least like ability to describe how the organization operates, I think has to go down kind of like the zero trust path, which is like, okay, now am I able to encode things I trust and also kind of identities? So I think that is one part of it. I do think that there also is another project, unfortunately, with another bomb name called D-Bomb, that probably is like looking at part of the similar problem in terms of like distribution. So I'm kind of also wondering like whether there's overlap there as well. And it's something that they've looked into.
Yeah, I might have been thinking along similar lines of what specifically is the NBOM in this case? Are they trying to define this application is going to need these egress policies to connect to these public servers somewhere that we
Oh, actually, it is much more low level than that. They're talking about routers and switches, and fiber optic cable and what bandwidth, and
So is this a
what
5G?
kind of boosting
5G?
and all that stuff. So
So is
yeah, we don't operate in that space. I was just bringing it up because I thought the idea of patterns driving policies is an interesting way to look at it.
So a hardware bill of materials for the network side of the hardware.
Yep, think about it from like the IoT device perspective. So you will be actually dealing with like hardware and software and networks. I think the Brandon Lum is right in that it is that D-bomb seems to be something similar. Again, I'm saying like what I'm asking like what do y'all think about the concept of creating like defining some patterns in which folks operate in cloud native and then saying like your policies, if you're writing policies, you should take these into account. So
Maybe to use a slightly different word, it kind of sounds like the idea of a more general heuristic for creating policies rather than like specifying the idea of your supply chain security policy should state X. We're saying, based on your organization and what you understand about it, you should take these things into consideration, and your policy should be some function of X, which is Y, like X plus whatever information you have internally, and you come up with a customized policy for yourself.
Well said. Yes. And the reason why I'm thinking, we should take a step back is because what I'm noticing is that folks generally are operating from that like business to business. I mean, they still think of like a software supply chain as, similar to a manufacturing supply chain, which is that there is always a supplier that you need to have a contract with. But that's not the case in cloud native.
Yeah, I like the idea. Let's to Brandon's point, let's see if we can fold it into the doc somewhere, or the idea. Just a one other kind of next week we've got KubeCon. I'm assuming a lot of the folks will be here. It will probably be right around party time in Amsterdam during this call. So I don't know if we'll be in session still or other things. A lot of folks will be there. Everybody okay with canceling this meeting? I don't know if it's like on the calendar, if we can cancel it or not. I don't know, Brandon or others. Okay, Brandon says yes. All right.
I'm fine with that.
Cool. So I'll share the link to the doc again here. And if can anybody do like a couple minute summary of the conversation from last week for me? Sorry, I missed it. And then missing work with sick kids meant I spent most of this week catching up on the work I missed last week. So I haven't been able to catch up on this yet. So
yeah, I can chat a little bit about it. We unfortunately spent a lot of time on a separate topic. So we only managed to spend, I think, like 15 minutes on the doc, which is why I was trying to be intentional with making sure we keep on time this time. So I think one of the things that we talked about was like the new introductions into the document. And one of the specific points that was brought up is kind of like this this notion of inventory, right? And I think the follow-up from that, I believe, Nisha, you mentioned that you were able to write a little bit of content on this.
Yeah, one paragraph that was at the top before the scope.
What is it?
Very small blurb. And the reason why I didn't like distribute it across the document is because there seems to be some mismatch between that introduction, like that idea, and the rest of the document.
Can you comment on it so we can see which one?
So can you see the first bit, the scope, and then there's a paragraph? So what I was thinking was that since we are talking about like the fact that we need to understand the 90% of the assets that we know, like what are they? Known unknowns. So that 90% is a giant like known unknown. Like we know it's there, but we don't know what it is. So that's the area where the uncertainty comes in. And so I felt like rather than ordering the securing over time, ordering like time, uncertainty, and scale, I was wondering if you could do it like uncertainty, scale, and then time. And that ordering makes more sense. So uncertainty is like, okay, we have this bunch of known unknowns. So that nicely dovetails into the problem statement, which is, okay, we have this bulk of software that we don't know about, so we have to start establishing trust. But then it is hard to establish trust with like an unknown entity, and that trust will be evolving. And then you have to assume that it's not 100% secure, and then it is not 100% knowable. So that's all I was thinking, like the changes that we need.
I do like the ordering for having uncertainty before securing over time. I think that may be helpful. So yeah, I think I agree with kind of maybe moving that securing over uncertainty up, and then having that thing you wrote kind of be folded into that section as well. I would be a little bit careful with the numbers on the known unknowns. Well, I think over here referring to different thing, which is open source. But also I think we need to tackle the unknown unknowns as well.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm doing over here is vaguely saying that, okay, we know that 90% of the software in general, based on like previous work done by a whole bunch of teams and institutions, have established that 90% is open source. So that bulk of software is known, but we know it's there, but we don't know what it is. So that's why I called it known unknowns, but we can call it something else. I mean, I'm okay with that. I usually think in terms of sets and hierarchies. So That's why I use those words. Very visual person. So is it okay for me to move that section of uncertainty to the top?
That's good with me. All right, no other objections, so fire away. So one of the things that I was hoping to do, this is maybe overly optimistic on my part, is next week being at KubeCon, the combination of folks being there together in person, the security village, maybe having some time to actually write some stuff, if nothing else, being trapped on an airplane for 8 hours to get there may have a good chunk of time to write some content for this. So I was hoping that if we kind of like take a high level overview of all of the different sections, like how comfortable do we feel trying to build out some of these sections a little bit more, try and turn the outlines that are there into content? Do folks feel like they have a good idea, or we have a good consensus in the different sections? Is there areas that we could spend some time talking about now to help us be more comfortable that we essentially have two weeks of working time, right? Because from now until next week, and then we'll meet again the Thursday after KubeCon. So any thoughts about that? All right.
I feel like if this was a one-person show, then that's like probably easy to do. It's very difficult to come to consensus, and I don't think we've come to any consensus. I don't think we've come to a consensus about this document yet. That's my view anyway. I mean, if you're actually like, it's nice when you know like what you're writing about before you start writing. If you don't know what that is, then it becomes hard.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I agree with you that I think we're still trying to build that consensus. So it's maybe more of a question of how are folks more comfortable iterating on things. The couple of options are to continue iterating at a meeting like this, going through and trying to add bullet points. Some folks do have some time to contribute outside, but it's also like it can be difficult, I think, to contribute into the bullet points and things like that outside of the weekly meeting, just because of the way things are structured, or the way things you may think about things can be very different than whoever put in the previous notes or bullets. So the other option would be to just write some of the different sections, knowing that they may be completely thrown away possibly or rewritten multiple times, but it may give us a better beginning to iterate on those things of like if we can, or it may lead to better discussion. I'm trying to think of how we can make it easier for folks to contribute outside of the meetings, such that we can try and make progress a little bit faster. At the same time, I don't know that there's an immense pressure to like wrap this work up and move on to something else. At the same time, like we could spend forever working on it. So
just my 2 pence here. I think the structure that we came up is something what we desired to cover, but during the process we can, find that the boundaries are different, the classification can be different, or there are lack of information about certain topics. So I would say like the best way, as you mentioned, is like to give some iterations first and then start discussing around something that is more concrete, right? Because right now I start discussing about the structure, and this is a good draft. This is a good guideline to start with, but like for discussion, we need facts and concrete topics to discuss. So I would say like if we could start writing something, then open it for discussion, and then redefining boundaries, redefining topics and specifications, that will be much easier and efficient rather than saying if we agree or not with the current structure. That's my opinion.
I think we're at the point where we have quite a bit of content already. I feel like there isn't any disagreement with the structure overall that hasn't been kind of ironed out. So I think we are good on that where we're saying we're having these 3 sections. Next part of this is to say that I think based on the bullet points, are we missing any things? Is there any gaps? Is there any areas that we have not covered where, or maybe we may not have expertise within this group to cover? And to possibly reach out and find that. But I think if we have an agreement that these general bullet points cover what we want to talk about, what we've found useful in the past is that if each person takes either a section each or like half a section each, maybe talking about problems, one person talking about resolutions, and just writing that up, but like keeping the bullet points to the side so you can like look back at reference to make sure everything's captured there. We found that to be helpful, and then it just goes through review after that. But yeah, that's one of the many ways that we found I think within this working group to be helpful.
Yeah, so I like that idea. And maybe to help facilitate the conversation a little bit, we can just kind of go through the different sections. I'll share my screen as well too. I don't know if that's helpful or not for people, but it at least helps me think that people are looking at something. Or at least I know other folks can see the same thing that I'm seeing. So maybe we'll spend the next we got about half hour left, next 15 minutes, about 5 minutes per section, going through the problem statements and resolutions, and then spend the last 15 minutes discussing if anybody wants to own any particular area or collaborate on it with someone else. So looking at securing in uncertainty, problem statements, we've got a lot of bullet points. Anybody see anything missing there, or anything that you don't think is a problem that's listed as a problem?
Yeah, it looks good to me. I think the only thing I was gonna say is I'm wondering, like with some of them is just like how much you sort of focus on each bullet point, because I think some of them at the top, right, should be mostly taken as givens, right? Like no system is 100% secure. Some of those are like, of course, right? As anybody who's been in cybersecurity for more than like a week should be able to kind of know that. Whereas certain other ones, like, hey, there's a lot of complexity in the supply chain security metadata. The known knowns versus known unknowns, I think is where we might want to flesh out a bit more. That's my 2 cents at least.
I don't know about that. There's a lot of executives that I've interacted with who still ask, why not 100% secure? And then like security folks have to breathe a deep sigh and explain.
I wonder, and this is just, I'm going to throw this out there, is do we want to have them as an audience? If, like, for example, right, if there has been decades worth of research that have brought up this up time and again, if these sorts of executives haven't listened to it, I doubt a paper coming from us re-explaining it is gonna provide that push over the edge.
So I think the
Yeah,
other
you
thing
have
is-
you have a point there.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that's difficult about going from an outline to actual writing is to understand the like how much the outline expands. And like some of these things may be like the bullet line, like the bullet point turns into one sentence, and the other sections may expand out and become a large part of the content. And so like I agree with what you're saying, but it's like having this is like an introductory sentence to the paragraph of the problem statement. That may be sufficiently cover it. And I do agree that I think maybe one way to do this is for folks to, rather than trying to reorder these in priority order or things like that, if folks see something that's like really important that they want to like, there's either put a comment so that they suggest moving it up or bold it or put some color or something else, just say like, hey, this is a thing we really want to expand on. This is the like the real substance of the problem from our perspective.
Would you be able to write something like that in the executive summary?
Sorry, I think I forgot already what I said. Something.
Just a quick note about what you said, like let me see if I can summarize it, and I'll put the note in the executive summary.
Thank you. I think the other thing is that there may be some things that maybe another good thing for us to call out is like, how confidently can any of us speak to something like behavioral analysis? Is that something we feel confident addressing? Are there any sections that we should reach out to anyone in particular to try and get some help with? So behavioral analysis, I definitely could not speak to. I don't know if anybody else here could speak to that.
And I think it might be okay for us to just call it out of scope because we're not comfortable writing it, especially because this is supposed to be a pretty short document. So, yeah.
I think we should maybe try and at least does anyone know anyone else that has kind of expertise in this area? What is this kind of looking at things like chat analysis, like Mandiant kind of things? This is looking kind of like global threat. So all you're thinking is this more like, you know, you have SysDic, you monitor your networks and try and find indicators of compromise type of thing. Is that the latter?
I think it could be any yeah, I mean, I think that the latter makes more sense to me of like in like the internally part, at least, of like, hey, you know, if we have network software that says, why are all these packets going to North Korea or somewhere else they shouldn't be going to? Whereas across the broader internet is a thing that is done by certain companies and certain people who like have the infrastructure and the expertise in that. And I don't know enough about what those things do to speak to it.
Maybe we can get someone at SysDic to talk a little bit about this. Or just like express like a couple bullet points.
See, this is a great part about KubeCon being next week is I can go and find some people. Brandon?
So I haven't been doing a lot of contributing to this because I've kind of been sitting back and not quite fully getting the detail of what we're going for on this. But the question that I would look at when I'm reading through it is, what's the expected action? When you give something to an executive and you say, here it is, read it, and he reads through this and says, or she reads through this and says, okay, hair on fire, everything's terrible. What's the action that we expect them to take away with this? If it's just showing up to the engineering team and saying, great, we need you to implement best practices, I feel like the engineering team already knew they were supposed to be implementing best practices. So I'm looking for I don't know if it's something concrete or if it's just more direction or something. I don't know.
That's
I think-
really good
Oh, go
feedback,
ahead.
Brandon. I just want to say thank you for sharing that because we should understand that and have that expectation set. And if you're here in these conversations and don't understand that, someone who just picks up this paper off of the street or the internet or wherever, like they will also not understand that. So sorry, Nisha.
I was going to say, I thought that we decided that the goal of this is to provide like executives some considerations to go take to their teams. Now, I don't know how that would be communicated in a document for executives, but basically, rather than telling their leaders, like whoever their direct reports are, hey, find out more about this securing software supply chain, and their leaders are like, I don't know, we have a secure software supply chain. I don't know what you're talking about. But it's easier if they say, rather than find out about secure software supply chain, find out about, find out about how we can increase observability, or find out how we can implement scanning across all the components that we're ingesting, find out how we can inventory all our open source components. So that sort of thing, I think, would be useful.
Perhaps it's easier if because I'm looking at this saying we've written the white paper of how to build the secure build infrastructure, and you harden that infrastructure, you have runtime monitoring, you have all the other different details that we specified in that paper. And a lot of this felt like we were saying, well, we also need to do the artifact ingestion and focus a lot on there because you've got a lot of different artifacts. At least that was the high level I was getting from the top of the document. So if you make the executive summary, for me, it helps if the executive summary is a summary for something else we've already created. And so to say that we've got the guidelines for what the engineering team is supposed to run with written down somewhere, they need to go through and check all these boxes and make sure they have a tool that does X, Y, and Z. And so that would make more sense to me if we said, okay, we've got that all documented. Now this is the executive summary that gives the high level senior management the ammo they need to say, go implement this.
My initial thoughts of this, I think like the documents that we have out there are kind of like building bottom up, and we are kind of trying to at least the idea initially that we came to agreement on was like, okay, let's try and address this from top down. I think we're still a little bit, at least in my opinion, I think there's still a little bit of gap in the sense that there's multiple layers into this. I know like one of the things that we were trying to write was like, oh, how do you actually like kind of more towards the summary of the white paper stuff, or at least like policy white paper converted to like policy instructions, and how you would try and execute them. But we found that it's difficult to express that, at least towards like the executive level. So I think the value for me I see in this is, I think for the audience is for CISOs that are not there yet to hopefully get to a point of thinking where often use CISOs to kind of pick that up. But I also think another thing that we get value out of this is this lets us be put in a position to develop more material that is focused more around policy and governance, security policy and governance, and kind of occupy that space a little bit better and kind of work downwards towards like where does governance and policy meet practices. So I guess TLDR, this is a little bit self-serving for us as well to kind of like produce more material, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the one other thing that we had chatted about. Sorry, I'm also trying to. When you're sharing your screen, the reactions thing is buried like 8 levels deep in the menus. The documents we've created, like in addition to being, I think, bottoms up and focused on the kind of the practitioner, they're also fairly idealistic, of like in the ideal world, this is what like how you secure your software supply chain. And I kind of tried to fold some of the sentiments about like there is some real complexity and hard parts to doing this. And hopefully that this document covers what some of those things are. That's like, I don't know that any of this like the sections securing over time, uncertainty or scale, like they don't change any of the tools or techniques we would recommend potentially to solve these problems. At the same time, they make a difference between saying this needs to be a full-scale effort across our organizations versus like, hey, one DevSecOps engineer, can you go implement this and just like put in all of our pipelines, a vulnerability scanner, and now we've got a secure software supply chain. Like, to help the executives make a better ask of the team, like, hey, we need to really build this complete system.
This is Sad. So I think it's a good idea to talk about the complexities of software supply chain, lay out all the risks involved. But I think what is even more important is come up with a prescriptive approach, something actionable that enterprises can use. I mean, like, I think people kind of know about the issues and why software supply chain security is important and what are the dangers, but it's good to actually put things in perspective. However, I think what is really needed in the enterprise is some kind of prescription of this, you need to do this and you need to do this. I know we shy away from naming the software because, you know, this is against the policy, but I think we should talk about at least the technologies involved, because there could be multiple implementation platforms that implement these technologies. I think we should do something more concrete that they can actually take action upon and you know and implement.
All right, I'm gonna step in here. I'm putting my foot down. We've been through this conversation. We made a decision. We can't go backtrack. We're not gonna get anything done. This has happened before, and this caused work to not be done. So I'm gonna put my foot down. We're not revisiting this. If you had something to say, we should have discussed it a month ago. So there will be a next round of work being done. Let's express the opinions there and move towards a different work outcome. But for now, I think we've agreed upon what we want to do initially, and let's just finish it may not, mileage may vary, but getting something out is better than not getting something out.
Yeah, I do think we should, like putting this section in the top here of like, maybe this is only an internal part of this, of like, let's just capture what that historical decision was, so that we can point people to this section and say like, read this here, and like, this is what we're doing. And I do think there is something actionable that needs to come out of that, but it's maybe like an executive has a conversation with their direct reports, or an organization tries to figure out a plan for how they're going to secure their software supply chain, or it's very different than like the actionable like takeaways from this are not going to be like, go use tool X or go use tool Y. It's going to be like, the action is start a conversation, I think. And hopefully that's reasonable and agreeable.
That's not what I'm
Right.
saying. I'm not saying that we should tell them use this tool and use that tool. At the very least, we can talk about the technologies out there that they can they should implement, and there could be
Yeah.
multiple implementation of those technologies.
We've had this conversation. For this particular case, we are keeping it conceptual. I don't disagree that it's important that we do that. I just think that it will not fit in the executive document of 5 to 10 pages. That's a different type of document.
Yeah, my main thought was to say the action is give this document to your team. And by this document, I'm saying link over to some of our other white papers we've already done.
So I do want to, however, address the fact that we do need some kind of like a framework of how to go about addressing all these problems within an organization.
I agree. Yeah.
However, I mean, we don't have to go into details about like, oh, use this particular technology. It's enough if we can say, allocate resources towards a certain process, or a certain system development. Like, you can't do this, like, you can't do step 2 without doing step 1 first. So you must first, we recommend that you do step 1.
Right. So I think like this document is chapter 1, which is like, this is how you should be thinking. Step 2 is like, what is organizational change that at a higher level you have to do, which is what you're talking about, right? So I think the way that I imagine this is that, like, don't think of this as like, this is one document and this is the document. Like, this is chapter 1 of like a series of this is chapter 1 of the manifesto, right? And then basically we are gonna be working as a group to add on things. The reason we can't tackle it holistically is because it doesn't work in open source. We've tried it, it's failed miserably because that requires a little bit more a longer term more involved effort, and generally that we haven't had success with trying to do that. So just want to frame it here, that this isn't the be all end all document. This is like one slice, and then this will be part of like a series of documents that would become the resource. It's just that we're tackling it bit by bit, just because in open source, is if anything stretches more than 2 or 3 months, it's dead. At least within these type of working groups.
All right, so considering the time remaining and where we're at now, is anybody comfortable volunteering for owning or leading one of the 3 sections? And I'll put my hand up to say I'll volunteer for whichever one nobody else picks. So securing an uncertainty over time and at scale. Anybody have a like strong interest or desire to kind of go through those or own a section?
I'll also volunteer for the thing that nobody else is volunteering for.
All right, so we just need one person to pick one of the things, and then Nisha and I will take the other two.
I can do at scale if nobody has an interest. It seems like no, we don't have any takers for any of it.
Yeah, so
Sorry,
let's.
I missed that part. Is somebody already taken the vulnerability scanning and stuff like that, or is it open, still open, the first part?
So there's not really a specific section for vulnerability scanning. There's a section for securing over time. And I think, Brandon, I know you had some opinions, or no, I think you had more opinions about the uncertainty section. But maybe there are some aspects of the vulnerability scanning in securing over time.
I mean, I can help contribute in this area about vulnerability scanning, CV integration, and all the security scanning. And if there is need in that area, I can definitely help.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so then maybe I'll jump in for the over time, and then so maybe the plan of action for the, and then we can either see if anybody anyone wants to volunteer or jump into the uncertainty section. Maybe the couple of action items I'll put in the other notes of like if we can kind of establish the like importance or priority of, and this is just mostly recapping what we've chatted about in that first section, since we didn't quite get through the other ones. The importance of or priority of the bullets in the problem statements and resolution sections. And I think this will help us identify needed outside help or feedback. So in the example, we had talked to some folks from Sysdig or a similar type company for the like anomaly detection type stuff. And then the other part of this was, there's something else in my mind is turning to space, but also just to like anything missing or included. This is basically anything to add in or take out. So maybe by the next time we meet, we can have, I don't know, we'll have a consensus, but we'll at least lock down a little bit more of the content of like, we're going to write something about this, or we're not going to write something about this because we either don't have the expertise, or we weren't able to get feedback, or we don't think it's relevant for the scope of the current document. I think, does that sound pretty? So I think this gives us a really good, I'm optimistic we can really tighten down the three sections. We can still work out how to connect them together, how to do the introduction and other things. And then I think this will let us start writing.
I do have some text on the uncertainty, but I'm not sure whether I can use it. I have to check. So,
Nisha?
So I do I do have a concern about like the bullet points under each of the securing topics. They may be too granular for the kind of thing that we're trying to take away from this document, which is something that is more like an executive general direction. So
these I think were just left over. I don't think there's any. They were from some of the original structure that was there. So we should maybe we may only have kind of 2 sections under each category, which would be the problem statement and the resolution. And then if we think that we need something else to like connect the sections, like a transitionary type thing or something, we might add that in. But I think like given the size of the document we want to aim for and how many bullet points we already have just under the problem statements and resolutions, I think that's going to be all of the content for this once we start actually writing it out.
Okay.
Unless there's strong. And I'll take that too as a separate action to kind of like, I'll try and change the structure a little bit, keeping all the same content, just structuring it slightly different. So, all right. Appreciate all the feedback from folks today. Appreciate Brandon, the reiteration of both Brandon's the reiteration of we need to convey what our point is, and also Brandon, the other Brandon, keeping us on track of like we know what the point is and like we just need to stick to it. So and that will help us move forward and get this out the door. So thank you everybody for the help and contributions. See some of you in person next week. See others in an hour at a different call, and probably everybody else somewhere else along the lines. But safe travels for those going somewhere, and enjoy hopefully a quiet week for others who aren't traveling.
Enjoy KubeCon.
We'll work on your slides.